Good night of Shabbos, ladies. Pleased to have this opportunity to address the Sheikh about it, Arzeinu Agadesha, in honor of the Rebbetzin Yortzeit of Chav Shvat, to talk about her a little bit and try to explain how I feel, what she means to us. When I was before Bar Mitzvah, shortly before my Bar Mitzvah, my parents sent me from home in Boston to New York to learn the Lubavitch. Within a short time, I got to understand the workings of 770, the people, the Zdonim, etc. The Frierdiker Rebbe, at that time, this was Tov Shin Zayin, 1956, 4 years before Yud Shvat, Tov Shin Yud. I would always try to get into the Fabrengens of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe would speak in the Yom Pagre, sometimes in Yontif, sometimes in Yom Beis-Achel, Yom Beis-Tammuz, Yom Tes-Kislev, etc. And the people would come to the Fabrengen. Not many people. There weren't that many in Nash, in New York, in Brooklyn at the time. But the people would come on the night of the Mitzvah, Yom Tevim, etc. And I would stand by the open. There were two doors to Kenisa, to the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment, at the second floor of 770. Both doors were used for guests coming to the Fabrengens. And I would stand at this door, that door, as the guests came. And but I wasn't let in. I was too young. There were no young boys there. So what happened was, every time there was a Fabrengen of some sort by the Rebbe, I would stand by one of those two doors, waiting to chance maybe a miracle would happen and somebody would let me in. So one time, I was 14 by then. It was Shavuos afternoon, the afternoon of the second day of Shavuos, and I was standing near the kitchen door, the entrance to the apartment on the second floor, and there was nobody there. The Rebbetzin opened the door to see who was there, to let in, and she saw me. And I said a little prayer in my heart, and she said, "Geh rein." She let me in. It was fantastic. I went through the rooms till they got to the dining room where the Rebbe was sitting. The Rebbe was talking. There weren't more than 45 or 50 people all together in the room. 15, 16 were sitting around the long dining room table. The rest were standing around. And the Rebbe was in the middle of a sikha. I couldn't understand what the Rebbe was saying. The Rebbe's speech, as you may know, was impeded. And he couldn't walk. He was suffering a lot from the tzaras he had before he came to the United States in 1940. And but that marze, that sight that I saw, I can't describe it. Every time I think of it, I feel something, and it seems to me that this is what it must be like in Gan Eden. And it was extremely touched me to my neshama, and I owe that to the Rebbetzin. She's the one who let me in. In the course of the years, till Tov Shin Yud, she and sometimes the Rebbe came to the door and let me in. And I'm eternally grateful for that wonderful act of kindness. Quick fast forward to 1954, Yud Dalet Kislev, Tov Shin Yud Dalet. It was the Rebbe's 25th wedding anniversary. It was a Shabbos, Pashas Vayetze, and nobody knew if there'd be a Fabrengen or not. Knowing that it was their anniversary, there was no hint at all that there would be a Fabrengen that Shabbos, but there was. After davening, the Rebbe came out, Fabrengen, the little shul upstairs in the Zal. There weren't many people, not everyone, no one expected a Fabrengen. It was a surprise. And the Teichen, what the Rebbe said that time, you may have heard before me, was that this is the day that brought us together, that tied me together with you and you with me. What did that mean? That meant that the wedding day, the day that the Rebbe connected with the Rebbetzin, the Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter, was something that very special, and because of that, we have a Rebbe. And I don't have enough time today to talk about the years before that, but I want to go again fast forward to something that happened on Shmini Atzeres, Shavshin Lamed Ches, where during the Hakofis, Shmini Atzeres night, there was a horrible thing that happened in the middle of the Hakofis, fifth Hakofa. The Rebbe it was obviously, his face turned ashen, he didn't feel well, it seemed, and he took hold of the chair near the Yom Kiddush where he was standing. And obviously something was very wrong, nobody knew what. The Rebbe insisted on finishing the Hakofis through the 7, and he danced with the Rashag, as he would do, the first and the 7th Hakofa. And they went upstairs, and there were a few doctors there who came for Yontif, Chassidish doctors, and it was a night after Hoshana Rabbah, it was a difficult day. The people came for Lekach after a long davening. And I noticed in the afternoon, the Rebbe went home for 15 minutes, he didn't look well to me. And something was going on that the Rebbe was troubled by. But he came back, and obviously something was wrong. So the doctors told him, Rabbi, you didn't eat anything today. So the Rebbe said, I'll make Kiddush, but it's Shmini Atzeres, I have to go to the Sukkah. The Rebbe went to the Sukkah, and in the meantime, somebody went to tell the Rebbetzin at home that the Rebbe doesn't feel well, and she came walking. And just before the Rebbe made Kiddush, she walked into the Sukkah, and she heard Kiddush. And then it was a very, very long night ahead. The Rebbe was hooked up to the machinery, the test, his heartbeat, etc. And it wasn't good. It didn't show good. And the doctors didn't know what to do. There was no heart doctor, no cardiologist there to see if it was a matter of the heart. But nobody had no idea what it was all about. So, but the Rebbe was hooked up to the machines, and you could see that the heartbeat was very irregular, which is very dangerous. And all the doctors who came, some who were there for Yontif, and some who came were called. 4 doctors came, specialists from the New York area. They examined the Rebbe, and they said the Rebbe had a serious heart attack, and he has to go right to the hospital immediately. And the Rebbe said he doesn't want to go. He will not go to a hospital. And the matzah kept getting worse. Each doctor went away. They were afraid to stay and be responsible for what could happen, chas v'sholom. And that's how it was. About 6:30 in the morning, there was again a flutter of activity on the EKG, and the Rebbetzin came walking down the steps from the 2nd floor from the Rebbetzin Chamadina's apartment, the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment. And she comes down the steps. I was standing there, and she says, what's happening? So we told her exactly what happened in the past few hours. And she said, so what do you want to do? So the doctors who were there, the Hamisher doctors, said that we're going to have to sedate him and take him by ambulance to the Mount Sinai Hospital. And she says, and what does my husband say? Very cool and calm and collected the Rebbetzin was. They said he doesn't want to go. So she says, well, if he doesn't want to go, I never knew a time in my life with him that he was not in total control of himself, even for an instant. I cannot allow you to do that. At this point, the Rebbe's very life was at stake. It was very serious. Every doctor who came, everyone, had no hope for staying in his office in 770. Everybody said pe'echad, with emphasis, without any sofek or sveiksveker. And they don't have any children, they don't have any family, the Rebbetzin. And that's all she has. She's all he has. And it's Zakonos Efoshes Mamish. And she stands there, they said, cool, calm, and collected. And she says, if my husband doesn't want to go, I can't allow you to take him. I walked away across the hall to the Merkaz room, the office, and I hear her following me. And she comes into the office and she says, in Yiddish, she says, Rabbi Krinsky, ihr kennt doch sehr viele Menschen. Ihr kennt nicht gefunden, eine Tochter für meinen Mann. Rabbi Krinsky knows so many people who can't find a doctor for my husband. And as soon as she said that, I had a Baruch Mavrik in my mind about a doctor that I knew, but he was in Chicago. He was a product of my Shwager Rabbi Herschel Schusterman, the Rav in Chicago. And he was a Harvard grad, a medical, and I knew about him. He was a good cardiologist. I said, we can't find a doctor in New York who'll treat him in his room, in his office. I'll call him up. I called him in the morning, 6:30, 6:45. Had to ring a lot of times. It was Yontif. Finally, through Rabbi Schusterman, I got hold of Dr. Ira Weiss. I told him the story. He says to me, I'll get on the first plane I can out of Chicago to the Rebbe. But if he doesn't want to go to the hospital, don't anyone dare send him to the hospital. It'll make him much, knowing the Rebbe, it'll make him much worse. So the Rebbetzin was 100% right. Oh, there were started made, he suggested somebody else come before him, Dr. Tischholz, and he came later. He came around 1 o'clock. We sent a police escort to bring him from the airport to 770. He didn't leave the Rebbe's room for 2.5 weeks. It was a Yom V'Layla, nursed the Rebbe back to health. Thank God, we had the Rebbe. It was indescribable. The Rebbe's courage and emunah, the emunah, Yemina B'Hashem Meisha Avdei. She believed in the Rebbe much more than we could imagine. Now, there was another incident where she played a major role in our lives. You know, Hey Tevis, celebration of the victory over the Sforim, the court case. It was a bitter court case. I don't have time now to go into details. Books can be written about it. But we had to go to court, federal court. And in order to do so, the judge gave us 3 months for preparation. It's called discovery, where each side can investigate the other side's documents and things of that nature to have full knowledge of what they're talking about when they go to court. Well, there came a time in that period that they wanted to depose the Rebbetzin. The deposition is a very ugly process where lawyers sit down and question the person, one of the plaintiff or the defendant. And it's a very unpleasant experience, especially for a woman in her mid-80s. I think it's very, very tough. You have to be consistent with what you say. What you said in the first hour, I have to say the next day or 3 hours later. You have to halt cope, like they say. So I mentioned this to the Rebbe with some reservation that maybe we should try to avoid it somehow. In the Rebbe's office, the Rebbe says, no, let her go. Let her do it. She'll come through with flying colors. Let it happen. We were all shocked that the Rebbe's okay and his wife's deposition. The time came. It took place in the Rebbe's house on President Street. She asked me to sit next to her. 4 lawyers came from the other side. 3 lawyers came from our side. And it was tough questioning. I attended many depositions for the office, otherwise. And I never saw a person so cool and so steady and consistent with everything she said. She didn't say an extra word or a phrase. She answered like you're supposed to. Some people get carried away and they stop talking too much, which gives away too much to the opposing attorneys. She was just perfect, 100%. At the end of the, about an hour and a half to an hour and 3/4, the attorneys said, Mrs. Schneerson, tell us, did the books in the library that claim were stolen, did they belong to your father, or did they belong to the community? The whole case turned on whether the books were private. If it was private, then the one who stole them, he has rights to it. If it belongs to the community, he has no rights at all. So she said, I'll never forget these words sitting next to her, last words of the deposition. My father and all that he owned belonged to Chassidim. And everything he owned belonged to Chassidim. And they put off the cameras, and she turns to me, his talis and tefillin. When the case happened, when the trial happened, it took 3 weeks. It ended on a Friday afternoon. And the judge, the federal judge, in charge of this case, asked to have a television brought into his office, to the courtroom, on his desk, in his office desk. And they put on something. I didn't know exactly what it was. I found out later. It was something, he wanted to see part of the Rebbetzins deposition that was recorded. And we sat there. This was the last hour of the case, of the trial. We sat there wondering what's going on, and then he had it put off, and he said to everybody, "Remarkable." It was strange that he gave such a praise, but the fact was he was watching the Rebbetzin deposition, and she was actually she was a daughter, so she was part of the case, and it was that statement that she said that my father belonged to Chassidim, and everything young belonged to Chassidim. That was the word. That was the phrase that gave us the victory of Heitevis. Again, it was the Rebbetzin and the Rebbetzin alone. The Rebbe created shluchim, shluches, and children of shluchim and shluches that right now are turning the world upside down, changing the landscape of Jewish life all over the world. We're now in 108 countries. And it reminded me last week in the Haftarah from Pashas Beshalach in Shiras Dveira, when she said, "Libi l'chekikei Yisrael, ha'mitznat ben ba'om." That to me talks about shluchim and shluchas. That Dveira HaNeviah, her heart was with the shluchim l'chekikei Yisrael, and the shluchim other chekikei Yisrael. That's where her heart was. And I think about what she meant to us. I'm reminded of the Gemara when Rabbi Akiva came back after 24 years. Perhaps it's from his home. And he was approaching his home, and his wife, people didn't know who she was. They were trying to prevent her from approaching her husband. And he said, "Don't leave her alone. Shali v'shalachem shala." Whatever we are, whatever we hope to be, we owe to her. That was the Rebbetzin Chemushk.